The most comprehensive documented UFO wave didn't actually happen in the US, but today we're going to Argentina. There are some very insane documented cases by civilians and by the military, and that's what today's show is all about. Hey, ufologers, I'm Christina Gomez, and welcome to this episode of Mysteries with a History. Let me bring in my co-host, Jimmy Church of Fada Black Radio, because we have so much to cover. Jimmy, happy Thursday. How are you doing?
Happy Thursday. Here we go. Wow.
Good.
Thursdays are always one of the busiest days for me. It's wrapping up the week. I have 3 shows that I do and everything else that is involved. And my highlight of my Thursday is being here with you and everybody else. So, yeah, here we go. And Argentina today. Christina.
Argentina's a nice
wait.
place.
After I won't tell everybody about our text earlier today, but after that text back and forth thing, I have to ask, why Argentina? Because this I truly don't know, do I?
We haven't done a show in Argentina. We've covered cases in other shows that have like infiltrated, but we haven't done a full show on the country. And the great thing about this show that we do together, Jimmy, Mysteries with a History, we've focused on so many different countries and states, going from California all the way to India. And we've covered South America as a whole, but it seems that Argentina needs its own episode. There's so
Is
many
that your
things that have happened.
last and final ansor?
That's my last and final answer, and I'm
That's your last and
stamping
final-
it on a sheet of paper.
Yeah, it's we cover South and Central America so much because so much is going on down there, and
Right.
we've done so many shows now that they all kind of run together.
And it's been a lot of years
Yeah,
doing this
it
together
has.
too.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. I can't argue with that. Argentina, I think every country down there kind of deserves its own day. Well, we've done a Brazil day.
We've done
right?
Brazil, we've done Peru, we've
Chile.
done Chile.
Right.
Now we're doing Argentina.
Now we're doing Argentina. And so I went, we'll get into this later because this first case is full-blown crazy town.
Oh, yes.
We've got 2 close encounter cases that are pretty nuts, but I compiled a list. I got one of the documents from the Argentine military that they used at a press conference that they released a bunch of cases that they were investigating. And I have that list, and it's pretty wild.
Wow.
So we'll get to that. That's our done moment. We will get to that, but we're going to start. I'll hand it off to you. The 1973 case of Dionisio, and Llanca is his name, and it's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts. Do you have images?
I do. I have drawings, artist renditions for this one.
This case, we're going to get into this pretty deeply as quickly as we can because we have so many other cases to cover. But this case, I don't want to get ahead of our skis, but there are certain details about this case when you get into the minutia of it that I find completely fascinating. And the way that he described the interior of the ship with multiple screens and that showed stars on them, monitors. I thought that was interesting. But they also had a breakdown, mechanical breakdown and stuff inside of the craft. And the 3 beings that came up, we'll circle back to this. 2 were male, 1 was female. And it turns out in the case, I don't know if we're going to touch upon this. I wanted to mention it in front, that she was the engineer. She was the mechanic. She's the one that put the ship back together. And it was how he explained it in the detail that he did that I just find really compelling. So let's get into this case. We'll circle back to the repairs that were done and how that happened. But take us to October 27th, 1973.
Yeah, very close to Halloween. It's definitely more of a spooky story. And so Dionisio Llanca began what should have been a pretty normal drive to Bahia Blanca, all the way to Rio Gallegos. And he's a truck driver. He was just minding his own business, doing the
Right.
drive, just doing the routine stuff. But Llanca was an experienced 25-year-old truck driver, and after dinner with his uncle, his name was Enrique Ruiz, he departed at about 12:30 a.m. in his Dodge 600 truck loaded with construction materials. And after an hour into his journey, he experienced, this is really strange, he experienced a flat tire due to the heavy loads pressure. At least that's the explanation for it. And then at 1:15 a.m., he was alone on this isolated road. He began changing the tire when the night freaked him out for the rest of his life. So he mentions and he recounts later, he says, I braked the car on the shoulder. I got out. I took out the jack and tools and began to change the tire. And the road was completely deserted. All at once, the road was illuminated with this very intense yellow light that
Yep.
seemed to be about 2,000 meters away. And initially thinking the light might be headlights from an approaching vehicle, Yankai just continued doing his job, just continued changing the flat tire. But these lights began to intensify dramatically, changing from yellow to bluish, like an electric arc welder. That's the way that he described it. And then he continues of, I tried to get up, but I was paralyzed. I literally couldn't stand up. I had no strength. And the strange thing was my legs wouldn't respond. I was on my knees and I wanted to get up and look towards the woods that grew along one side of the road, but he wasn't even able to do that. And then he mentions that then I saw a great thing in the form of a plate, or in this case, a saucer, suspended in the air at about 7 meters high. And three people were at my shoulders looking at me, like kind of what we're seeing in the image here on screen. I tried once more to get up, but I couldn't. The paralysis became so extreme that I couldn't even talk. And these three beings observed him for about 5 minutes, but in this case for Yanka, it felt like a lifetime. And he described them, as Jimmy had mentioned, two men, one woman, distinguished by the woman's breast formation and the long blonde hair reaching to the middle of her back. That's how he was able to decipher between the two genders. And the men also had blonde hair, but they were a bit shorter, and they were wearing identical single piece smoky gray overlays with yellow boots and these long type of gloves. And they carried no visible weapons or belts or helmets of any kind. They were pretty simply dressed. And right off the cuff, Jimmy, we've covered different types of alien species of people that have told stories of what certain aliens look like. These ones being blonde and pale and not incredibly tall, but like decently enough. They sound similar to the Nordics, don't they?
Yes, they do. What was interesting? Yes, yes, yes. The answers are yes, yes, and yes there. What he had said was they were fashion forward. The boots,
Love
the
that.
yellow boots matched the yellow gloves that went halfway up their arms. That the grayish uniforms were tight fitting. But they were there observing. He didn't see them come up. Okay, this is what's interesting about this case. And I remember first researching this many years ago, and I've always been fascinated with it. It seems that when the yellow light, first off, he's on a dark road. The yellow light appears. He doesn't know if it's another car approaching. He's a truck driver. He knows what traffic is. But it was a yellow light that seemed pretty bright and to illuminate the area. And he was there working on his tire on the truck. But the yellow light turns to blue. and he doesn't see the craft above him. He doesn't see these three humanoids, species, beings, whatever you want to call, standing there, just looking at him. He's looking in the other direction. Then he turns around and there they are, right? And they're just staring at him for 5 minutes with nothing going on. But he was able to take it all in. And you're pretty accurate there in describing what he saw, which was that they all had blonde hair. The woman was in the middle. The two men were flanking her. He did say it was obvious to him that she was a woman, right? And he gave his reasons why. But he said, yeah, that they had single piece, tight fitting gray suits on, yellow boots, long gloves reaching to the middle of the arm that were also yellow. And they didn't appear to have any weapons and no belts, which was pretty interesting. No helmets, so they were breathing oxygen. But this is where, for me, after that, it gets pretty strange, doesn't it? They put a device on his finger. He described it as, maybe you can help me out with this, but he describes it as looked like a razor blade with a tube on it. So I'm not sure. Now, the razor blade makes you think that it was there to cut, but it wasn't. It was placed on his finger. So there was that, but they take him on board the craft. They had issues with the craft, but he was able to look around, and he gave, I don't want to say a typical description of the interior of the craft. I would say it was completely atypical. It was different than what we have heard in the past. That the floor was a dull gray metal, and there was equipment everywhere, and which he mentioned the screens that had stars on them. Right now, that I never really heard that type of description before, the way that he presented it, Christine. I always found that very, very interesting. He described cables on the floor. Yeah, cables, and it just seems authentic, the way that he described the interior of the craft. That, you know what I mean? It didn't seem like it was following some other narrative that we have heard in the past.
Well,
And
to me, when I was looking at this and the details that you brought up and the description of how these looked, it's definitely giving 70s sci-fi movies. Like the outfits for sure were very fashion forward during that time frame.
yeah.
And then also mentioning cables as well on the craft. But one thing that really does make it stand out to where it can't necessarily be, a big old hoax of, oh, hey, we're making a really funny movie and you're the joke. In this case, Llanca had mentioned that when they were communicating with one another, there were no vocal inflections, but it sounded like radio badly tuned in with chirps and buzzes.
Right.
And on top of that, before he gets on the spacecraft, according to his testimony, one of the beings grabbed him from like the
arm.
his sweater,
Yeah.
his arm and his sweater collar, and lifted him firmly but without violence. And he mentioned that he tried to speak, but he wasn't able to because right before this incident, he was paralyzed. Remember, he wasn't able to move by any means. And then he gets this razor with a small tube is seen by him, and it's this type of painless application, but it drops 2 drops of his blood from his finger into the tube. And then that's when he loses consciousness. And this correlates similar to the Colares Brazil incident with the Chupa Chupa. People believe that their blood was being taken from them. There was another incident in the 1200s where a priest had encountered something very similar that was mentioned by Diana Pasulka in her research not too long ago. So we are seeing this consistent theme of the extraction of blood, but a very minimal amount.
Yeah, and so he he wakes up, he's confused, starts walking, gets some assistance, eventually makes it to the police station. Medical assistance is there. He passes out again. He wakes back up. He doesn't remember anything, right? And then they induced a hypnosis. Also, there were some drugs that were involved, and I think it was like sodium pentothal or something like that. But then the memory started to come back. So everything that we hear and we know now from the reports that were done came after the fact. But immediately after the encounter, he just woke up, between a couple of cars, and didn't know anything and didn't remember anything. It came back later. Another, for me, a very fascinating part to this story. Many people interviewed him about this case.
They did. And something else this is one detail that we don't hear often, is that he was missing a few belongings. His watch was missing, his
Mm-hmm.
cigarette lighter, his
Mm-hmm.
cigarettes were gone, but his money was untouched. Still in his wallet, still there in full. But not his watch, not his lighter, and not his cigarettes.
E.T. doesn't need money.
No, of course not.
E.T. doesn't need money, but they like a smoke once in a while. They like to fire up a heater. They know what a lighter is. But that I always thought that was a pretty interesting part of this case. The case has stayed there. It hasn't changed, and it's just another encounter, except the way that he was abducted. There wasn't any violence or anything like that. But to have the beings without helmets, I find that very, very interesting. No weapons or anything else. But there was something that was mentioned to him on the craft before we move on. We've got so much to cover. They said, hey, is it cool if we hang out on your planet?
That's
and
nice
he's
to
like,
ask.
yeah,
right?
yeah. And they said that some of the normal warnings that we have heard, look, just take care of this planet. It's a beautiful place. We like it. We would like to hang out here, but you guys are destroying it. And then they reveal to him that they have been in contact since, you ready?
The 1950s.
Yeah, 1950. Since yeah. Been in contact since 1950. Very, very strange details in this case for something that happened back in 1973.
It is. And I want to talk about this for a moment. I think it's really important. The way that we have described ET and UFOs have differed through the ages, not only with our language and how we describe them, but also our perspectives on these types of entities, where now people believe that when fairies were very commonly seen in the 1800s, they might have been ET of some kind. What if for Llanca, he's seeing these as like superhero beings from like sci-fi movies in the 1970s? What if these entities were attempting to tap into his form of perception and consciousness, of appealing to him in a way that would be like, hey, we're super cool and advanced, but also human enough to where you shouldn't fear us? I thought about that when doing the research for this episode, just because the details of how they looked seemed so out of the ordinary.
He wasn't afraid.
No.
He wasn't afraid. And now, if there's one part to this, I just wanted to mention really quick before we move on. Very similar description to the Travis Walton case. All right. Now, so if you go back to the Travis Walton, there were different beings that were on that craft, but he does have the encounter with the humanoid beings, blue outfits, yellow gloves, yellow boots, blonde hair. Very, very similar. Now, would Travis and Dionisio know each other or know of each other's cases? Probably not. not in 1973. And what Travis was doing, his encounter, was 1977. So when you look at it in those terms, would they have known of each other? No. And had the details of their cases? No. There are things that are astonishingly similar for me with Travis Walton and who he encountered and who Dionisio encountered. Very fascinating aspect of this. I always look for, I'm trying to connect dots. I
Have
think
to.
we all are. Yeah, we're all seeing these overlaps. What's it? Well, when you get those overlaps from people that have not talked to each other, like the Lonnie Zamora case, and the symbol that was on the side of that craft, that symbol was seen all over the world in different encounters. And that symbol was never released at that time by Lonnie Zamora. And I it's those, you know what I mean? Those are interesting overlaps that you need to take a look at and just wonder. Um, uh, you don't want things polluted. You don't want cases
Right.
contaminated. And that goes with any type of investigation or anything that anybody is doing. There's certain things you just don't reveal to the public because you don't want it to interfere with your work and your research and your investigation. It's really that simple. And in this case, we have that. I just find that very, very interesting.
It is, and we still have so much to cover. But first, X Guy, Steve, and Brett, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel and those super chats. And another great way to support this channel is to hit that like button right down below and subscribe if you haven't already. When we're looking at Argentina, they have their own protocols on investigating UFOs because back in 1962, they did encounter a UFO flap for consistent amount of months, really, all throughout 62 and 63, there were a lot of different UFO sightings. So the Argentinian Navy responded by creating the world's first official military UFO investigation protocol, distributing 2,000 standardized questionnaires to bases nationwide, which is a really interesting detail. And then, decades later, a senior military commander alleged that back in May of 1962, because again, the 60s, which is a really hot time globally for UFO sightings, there was a crash near a naval base, and he claimed alien bodies were recovered and secretly transferred over to the United States with
Dun, dun,
CIA
dun.
documents, dun dun dun, apparently corroborating parts of his account. Wow, why is the US always involved? Jimmy, that's my first question. What's
Well,
going on there?
I would say in a general sense, most countries don't have the capabilities to deal with something like this, to transport a craft, to backwards engineer it, alien bodies, technology, and everything else. That they just don't have the ability to do that. Right. And if the United States gets whiff of something like this, and they've got their fingers in so many pies around the world, and certainly in
They're knocking on the door.
North Central and South America. So when this happens, you've got to get the craft off your lawn. How do you do that? Well, you call the United States, they come in, they secure the area, they sanitize the area, they take everything with them, like nothing ever happened. And it's taken back to the United States where we have the facilities, the people, all of the logistical stuff that goes into place for the transportation, autopsies, storing of bodies, medical research, all of that can happen here in the United States, but it's not going to be happening in a small country like Ecuador or Paraguay or Europe. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. And I love Peru and I love Chile and I love Argentina, but these are countries that just are not set up to deal with stuff like this. Now, if we go back, let's go back for a second to the Espora Naval Air Base and those encounters at Bahia Blanca, 1962. So if we take a look at this, we're talking about May 22nd, which is what you just brought up. The military brought up this wave of stuff that happened. And this was at about 8:30. 9 o'clock in the evening, May 22nd, a squadron of fighters in the vicinity of Bahia Blanca's Commandant Espora naval base reports the presence of UFOs along its flight path. The interception lasted 35 minutes. Direct witnesses to the incident were Lieutenant Rodolfo Cesar Galdos and his student Roberto Wilkinson. And report number 02779 causes the first official acknowledgement by an Argentinian military wing, agency, or anybody else within the government. It is a crucial case when we look at Argentina. Now, if we fast forward, and I talked about this earlier, so let me do this before we get to the other abduction or the other close encounter that we're going to do. The reports that were released. Now, listen to the timeline here. All right, that were released by the Argentinian military to the press from an official report that they had put together. The one case that started all of this off, as we have mentioned, was in 1962 on May 22nd at Bahia Blanca's Espora Naval Base. And all of the direct eyewitnesses and everybody else that were involved with this went completely on the record, and official reports were written up. All right. The next case that happened after that was over Floresta District, September 8th, 1962. Lieutenant Juan Jose Vico cited, and check this out, Christina, this is a dun, a burnished metal, right? Burnished metal lenticular UFO. Is a disc shape from the side, lenticular cloud. UFO making smooth and controlled maneuvers. That is directly from the official military report. Shortly after that, at Ezeiza International Airport in Buenos Aires, December 22nd, 1962, this is just a couple of months later, a UFO was sighted about 3 a.m. Now, the tower operators, the flight controllers, were Horacio Alora and Mario Pizzuto, and they were there doing their job, watching air traffic, when a pilot from a commercial airline calls them and breaks into the air traffic controllers' conversations with other flights because they had one landing and one taking off. At that moment, the captain breaks in and says, "What's that thing at the end of the runway?" All right, end quote. Now, this is a very detailed report, but I'm going to just get to the main points here. Because of the UFO's brilliant glow, Alora, the flight controller, could not tell whether it had actually touched down or was hovering just above the runway. Then, as everybody is looking at it, and it was bright, it rose up off of the runway about 30 feet off of the ground and hovered there briefly. And then it just took off, rapidly accelerating to the northeast and disappearing. This is an official Argentine military report. Right after that, in 1965, between the months of June and July, a succession of UFO incidents occur in the Antarctic region, some of them producing electromagnetic disturbances and witnessed by personnel from the British, Chilean, and Argentine bases in the area of Antarctica. The phenomenon on July 3rd at Deception Island Naval Station generates the second official acknowledgement from the Argentine military. Then in 1973, on November 2nd, 6 members of the back at Espora Naval Air Base, by the way, close to Bahia Blanca, witnesses observe the maneuvers of a UFO, immediately producing the third official report from the Argentine military. Then in 1978, Christina, on the evening of February 4th at La Florida Dam in San Luis, 6 persons report the presence of a UFO and the descent of an occupant from within, leaving ground marks. The police precinct of San Luis through its chief, Lieutenant Colonel Raul Benjamin Lopez, issues a document which constitutes the fourth official acknowledgement from the Argentine military. But I'm not done. 1978, towards midnight on July 12th, a low-level UFO sighting causes a commotion in the Estacion Ramblan region, located between the limits of San Juan and Mendoza. It was witnessed by police officers and the town. The San Juan police chief, Colonel Guillermo Vogel, prepares the fifth official military report from the Argentine military. All right, now I've got one more. In 1982, in the evening of August 13th, a UFO causes a disturbance in the town of Londres, Catamarca, and its flyover produces strong winds and starts a conflagration. A police patrolman on duty says he saw an intruder. The provincial police emits and creates the sixth official document. All right, I'm not done. I'm not done. I actually have one more. 1986 is the last one. The appearance of a nighttime UFO and the discovery of a gigantic indentation on El Parillo Hill in Cordoba on January 9th prompts the city's municipal authorities to issue the seventh and final official acknowledgement from the Argentinian military's role in UFO research. There you go. Argentina. Yeah, you're right. They deserve a full show, don't they?
You absolutely slaughtered it. Just bam, 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 bam. One case after another, bring in the dates, bring in the names. The pronunciation was pretty good. Good job, Jimmy.
No, it was trailer park.
I thought it was great. I thought it was pretty good. No, absolutely killed it. You took all my notes and you ran with it.
Here's the thing, though. These are official reports from a government's military, in this case, Argentina, right? And something that and this goes back a long ways, and it just shows you how much we have fallen short here in the United States. And I know you and I were talking about this earlier. We've got on the calendar what appears to be another UFO hearing in Congress for September 9th. And it just seems to me, Christina, we're just trying to catch up to what all of our neighbors have been doing for decades now on this subject. All of the countries around us seem to have always taken this very, very serious. They've listened to the military. They've listened to their citizens. They've done follow-up investigations in a lot of cases, routed the military to these locations and to cover this and to protect the citizens. And our military and our government has done the exact opposite until now. And we're still not there, are we?
No, we are not there yet. And it just seems that South America as a whole has been very far ahead with this conversation, both on a civilian level and on a military level. They did create, for instance, Uruguay did create they were the first country to create their UFO office, a public one in South America in particular in the late 70s, early 80s, and then other countries followed suit, while the US didn't create their public one until many, many years later. And we're looking at Argentina and we're hearing these stories of military officials addressing this. We actually get their full names, which is a constant in many cases in South America, in Spain as well. Compared to the US, we get anonymous, we get a alias name or just their first name or just their last name. But in this case for Argentina and again other countries in South America, you get the full whopping name, first, middle, last name, their mom's last name, their dad's last name, maybe even their grandparents, and so on. So it just goes to show that the conversation is very different there. It's taken a lot more seriously. And we in the US, we need to follow suit because we're still behind, even though we're talking about it in a more grand scale.
In a more open way. Yeah.
In a more open way. Yes. We're still not at the same level, like you had mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. And today it's video, it's video capture, it's cell phones and so forth, and things can get manipulated. But if you go back and you look at some of the film footage, and specifically one case comes to mind, and to this day it just holds up, and that's the film footage that was shot, the film over Catalina Island here in Southern California. And you go back and just watch, that's film. And just go and look at that. It's not a bird, that's not a blimp, it's not a plane. It is what it is, but it's captured on film. And that's totally different. And so when we go back and we look at these historical cases, I say this over and over again with you, Christine. I think it's so important to go back before there were things like SpaceX launches, 2 times a week, lighting up the sky with something strange. And so there's that, and people not understanding what they're seeing and then shooting the videos. That go back historically and look at the record there. When only certain things were in the sky, right? Before jets, when planes had propellers, it was a different time. What was being seen in the skies? I just find it very, very interesting. And that's why these cases, like to describe the burnished metal saucer-shaped object on the runway, let's go back and take a look at this. Well, the military in Argentina took it very, very serious. Do we have time for one more, or are we going to get out?
No, we can do one more, but before we do that, that's why it's so important to cover these more historical cases, why we do this show, Mysteries with a History. It's because it sets a foundation, and it's a bit more difficult to debunk these much older cases when technology was very different. CGI wasn't a thing. Photoshop was still in its very primitive era, if anything. Which actually, we didn't get that until much later, compared to present day where everything
That's
is
right.
very easily debunked. We have to
Yeah.
cover these old cases to get an understanding as to what's happening right now.
Yeah,
It's so
and
important.
who was just on Joe Rogan? Was it Tulsi Gabbard? Who was?
Luna. Anna
Oh, it was
Paulina
Luna.
Luna.
Yeah, Luna was on, and elected officials, doesn't matter about gender, they all look the same to me. I don't know their names, but anyway, when she said, "Look, I can't, I've seen images of stuff that I know are not made on this earth." So what does that tell you? What is she looking at? Is it new? Is it old? What's the story behind the images? You have to have that, right? You have to have the backstory, where it was taken, what time it was taken, when it was taken, and what is it that she's trying to get to. And then she said,
Right.
one other point that you and I are just talking about. She said, I would argue that these sightings go back historically all the way back to the time of Jesus. And she's right. When you go back you go back before 1903, before the Wright brothers, and if you go back before the first hot air balloons in France in 1790, all right, you get before that. What's in the sky, Christina? What's in the sky?
Clouds.
Birds. Yeah, clouds, birds, right? Right? That's it. Right? I don't think bumblebees or butterflies are going to be mistaken for giant craft. So what else is in the skies besides birds? Right? And we know what a bird is. So if you see something in the sky and you write down in the historical record that you saw a shiny metal shield, right, flying through the sky, what is it that they were seeing? And I think the historical record, when you get back before technology, is some of the most important and compelling stuff that we can go back and research and contemplate and consider and develop a theory on. I think that is very, very important. And Luna made that case on Rogan. And I agree with her. I agree with her 100%. You can go back into the historical. How many times Have you and I, on this very program, have talked about historical cases in the 1600s, the 1500s, the 1400s, in the year 100, in 400 BC. How many times have we done this? Well,
Many.
I remember you and I did a show, and you can help me out on this, but we tracked a sighting from the coast of France through across southern Europe, through the Alps, and down into Italy on the same day, right? In
Did.
I think that was the year 1500, where you have the dates are there locked in, and they are seeing something fly across the sky. And I can tell you that from the description of it, it wasn't a meteor. The thing landed, right? Well, let's take a look at that. What is it that they were seeing? I just find this stuff fascinating. Like this next case. Let's get this in and out. We're out of time, everybody. So we'll do this really fast. This is the 1963 Trancas case. Happened on Monday, October 31st, Halloween. Dun, dun, dun. Halloween, 1963. Wow. This is when I was born. This was on my birthday. This is interesting. Two sisters, Argentina, 28, and Yoli, 21, were visiting their parents at their parents' ranch with their children. All right. Now, 9 p.m. that night, Dora Guzman. Dora was a housekeeper for them. She was 15 years old. She lived in the back of the house, but she suddenly starts freaking out, running back in and out of the house, stating that she could see lights on the railroad embankment about 200 yards in front of the ranch. That's about 600 feet away. So what do? What do the girls do?
They go to it.
They do. Yeah, they do what I wouldn't do in the dark. They go out to get a better look, Christina. Yeah, that's nuts. And what do they find? Well, it kind of goes back to Dionisio. They suddenly are enveloped in light, right? And they're bathed in this light. They're
Which is
trying
green.
to yep, they're trying to see what's going on. They can't make sense of anything. These are young women, right? Now I'm going to do the quick version of this because it's a pretty complex encounter. But in an instant, they noticed, as they describe it, a bunch of vehicles in a row with turrets like tanks, right? Turrets on the top and large rivets on the surface. Very interesting description, especially coming from young women. They don't necessarily understand what they're looking at like this. And they were unable to tell if the objects were suspended over the ground, just like the Air Force reports that we did earlier, or resting upon it. But they appeared, there was a bunch of these in a row, to have 6 windows on each with light coming out of them. So what do? They did what I do. They ran back to the house and locked the doors. Right? Smart move. They were freaked out. And so they locked themselves in the house. Mom and dad wake up. Everybody else wakes up. I think some prayers started to happen, right? And all of this because nobody knew what was going on. But they could see this is just 600 feet in front of the house. They see a long line of vehicles floating above the ground. After 40 minutes elapsed, the objects started to move forward through above the ground and then vanish toward the Sierra Medinas Mountains that were about 10 miles away. There you go. That's a great case right there.
It is. There's a lot more to it. There were other witnesses, other farmers actually saw this as well, which adds credibility to the story. And we've heard similar incidents to this one, but to hear these young women see this, to run to it, to mention that they saw not only a craft, but a green light that almost looks solid, like a laser, versus this kind of haze that we usually see with lights, is also very strange that we don't hear too often. But with the cases in Argentina, lights seem to play a really really big role in these cases. Right before we end today's show, got to give a shout out to Tina. Happy birthday. It is just, that's so awesome. Happy birthday. So thank you so much for being here, for being one of our amazing mods for how many years now? Like a really, really long time. So just a big happy birthday. Thank you, Tina.
Yeah.
And thank you, Jimmy, for being on the show today. Who do you have on Fade to Black tonight?
Man, I got a big one. I mean,
Let's hear it.
every show this week has been ginormous. And how do we top that? Well, we top it tonight because we have Trevor Grossi on the show, and we are covering his team and the SARS project and what they are doing underneath Giza. They broke the story. He broke the story. And we all know how viral this has gone and the other stuff that has been revealed. Well, tonight, Trevor Grossi. And I've been trying to get Trevor on the show for years. And he's camera shy. He's a good dude. He's a really good dude. He's like, man, I just can't do it, man. Just let me make my films. Just let me do my research. Let me do my thing. Well, he's out there all over Giza filming and doing his stuff over the years. And I kept asking him to come on the show. And then what happens? Boom. SARS happens. And now he doesn't have a choice. He's coming on Fade to Black. And so we'll see how camera shy he is tonight. But it's a really, really big show. So we're going to go through all of that. What is SARS? How does it work? What is it that they are finding in addition to the stuff that has already been released? What could it be? All of that tonight with the one and only Trevor Grossi on Fade to Black. It's going to be a huge show. So I'll see everybody tonight. Christina, always great being here with you. Another great show on Mysteries with the History. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy. If you enjoyed the show, hit that like button right down below and subscribe if you haven't already, as I do daily UFO news updates at 10 a.m. PST. So make sure to also hit that notification bell to not miss anything that is going on right here on this channel, because right now it just seems that UFOs are on everyone's mind, both in the political world, in an international scale as well, and we just simply can't stop talking about it. So if you're interested in UFO news, and this is the channel for you. I also do write articles for all of the shows where I embed them with all the sources that I use for them, and you can find that on my website at ufonews.co. That link is in the description box below, along with being a pinned comment. I want to say thank you to everyone catching the live show today, everyone that liked it, all of the super chats. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Tina, another big happy birthday. I just think you're so cool. And that is it for today. I will see you next time. Be safe, and remember, keep your eyes on the skies. If you enjoyed today's show, hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit the notification bell, as I do daily UFO news and updates. Fresh UAP stories, government disclosures, and breaking developments land here every single day.